Good evening. We'd like to call this meeting to order, please. And I will first comment that we recognize that this meeting takes place in Mi'kma'ki, the ancestral and unceded territory of the Mi'kmaq people. This territory is covered by the 1725 Treaties of Peace and Friendship. We are all treaty people. And I'm just going to quickly step through the agenda and then pass it over to our host. So Norm will make some opening remarks. Then Fire Chief Stevens will let us know a little bit more about what's been happening with the fire department over the past year. Wilson Fitt, our newest member, will speak about the status of the new fire hall project. And then Kirk, and to some degree myself, will present the financial report and budget, very draft budget. And then there'll be a Q&A at the end. So if you would please hold your questions until then, that would be great. So Chester Fire Services Committee Vice Chair Norm Countway.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the second annual Chester Fire Services Committee annual September meeting. First of all, I'd like to take a moment to remind everyone of what is at stake here for everyone. All right, I need to pick it up. Okay. I'd like to take a moment to remind everyone what's at stake here. We depend on the Chester Volunteer Fire Department for emergency response in critical personal and community situations, including fire, traffic, and medical emergencies. And as of late, frequent emergencies resulting from what seems to be climate change events. The volunteers with the Chester Volunteer Fire Department are trained and provide professional services to our community. The CVFD offers high value for its investment, committing their personal time and their safety of themselves to this community as they perform their job. Advance the slides. Just take us, so this is back one. Just to cover the a little bit of description of the area that the fire service covers. It's a large swath, including all of District 3 and including the village, all of District 7 and parts of District 1. As a refresher for your folks here tonight, the committee is a corporate body created by the Village of Chester and the municipality of the District of Chester to administer and oversee the Chester Volunteer Fire Department. This is a 50-50 partnership and a partnership agreement recognizing the so-called outer area and the village ratepayers and are roughly equal in their contributions to the fire and emergency services budget through the tax rate system. The committee role is annual budget development, fiscal management, and development of a 20 and a 5-year capital strategy, which includes new fire station project, which we will give a brief progress review of tonight. There are 6 voting members from the community that sit on the Chester Fire Services Committee. As you see there, Colin McDonald is the regular chair, myself as vice chair, and I help out in communication. Kirk Collicutt, Nancy Hatch, former village appointee, and James Robert. Our newest member, Wilson Fitt, has been a tremendous asset to the committee. His background in project management and financial analysis on large construction projects is greatly assisting in their efforts to maintain cost control and timely scheduling of the new fire station development. The fire department is represented at meetings by the fire chief and deputy chief, who are valuable contributors and liaison between the committee and the fire department members. The village commission staff are the administrators, and are directed only on the committee for fire-related business. The committee makes the recommendations to council, commission, and the commission based on the feedback from local residents and the fire services members. Let's take a few minutes to talk about the considerations to keep in mind when we're planning for the future of our unpaid service. The Chester Volunteer Fire Department is a 50-member organization in a community of people who donate their time and risk their lives to keep us safety in emergency situations, fires, floods, accidents, medicals, and more. Their time includes robust training and certification in addition to emergency response. Firefighters are your neighbors, your friends, and your family members. And we owe it to them to provide a safe work environment with proper tools and equipment for modern-day firefighting. Planning for the future. A recent article in the Chronicle Herald from just back in the last week of January reinforces what's been well documented. Firefighters, they don't always know what they're exposed to during a fire. We are planning for the future health of our community and firefighters and their safety in workplace. Due to the modern building materials of today, houses and contents, all fires are pretty much now chemical fires. We have electric cars on the road, which make it more complicated when trying to deal with these, and it all adds to additional health risks that we weren't exposed to back many moons ago. The health and safety of our fire department is paramount and needs to be addressed in modern day firefighting situations. This is a changing world. And as of late, it's become a lot more pronounced. There's some stuff going on down south. But why are the emergency services needs growing? Some of you may even say, why are they increasing and why can't they stay the same? Our climate is changing. The California fires that just happened a month ago, closer to home here, the Tantalum fires, Barrington fires, Shelburne fires, raging floods here, and deaths in the valley from flash floods are all increasing at regular intervals. Our community is expanding. We have 3 new housing projects in our service area, 1 new nursing home facility that's being planned. That's a rebuild of the existing one, and talk of a new recreational center. All of this growth is going to place enormous pressure on our volunteer service. And as we focus tonight, primarily on the actual operational budget of our existing service, please keep an open mind as to where we need to go to keep our community safe in the future. Before I pass it off to Chief Cody Stevens, there will be, we'll remind you, as Heather mentioned, there is a question and answer period at the end of the presentations, and we'd like to get through all of that. So if you could hold your questions until the end, that would be greatly appreciated. Thank you.
Do I need the mic?
No.
No? Okay. Hang out there, if you can't hear me, let me know. I'm Cody Stevens, Fire Chief here in Chester, for those who don't know me. I know just about everybody in the room. Thank you for coming, it's muchly appreciated. So last year was a busy year. Luckily, we didn't have any significant wildfire, no significant floods, no significant hurricanes, which meant a lot more sleep for Greg and I and all the members this year versus the previous year. But we did respond to 295 calls for emergency throughout the year. We completed 25 training sessions, including hose deployment, wildland fire suppression, inshore boat operations, chimney fire operations, MFR, medical first responder response, driver training, ice rescue, swiftwater rescue. We did an operation at Mayback, the Mill and East River, for those who don't know. There's all kinds of things down there to kill us. So federally, they are regulated to have the fire service in every 5 years and complete a mock operation of their propane storage. This year we expanded to do a rescue off the top of, the silo, not the big tower, but the silo. There's a huge 100-foot difference there. And we involved departments from across this municipality, right into, Kentville, Mahone Bay, Lunenburg. We had their aerials on site. We also performed some rooftop rescues there. We also completed a tabletop exercise with Remo around that exact event, which is a regional emergency management organization. They're the folks that when the day goes bad and it's outside what a fire department can handle, they get involved. And they talk to everybody that's involved: Department of Fisheries, Department of Environment, Natural Resources, DNR, Fire, EHS, RCP, local policing, the military if required. So it's hugely important that we have a good working relationship with those folks. Along with our mandatory live fire training. So all of our interior firefighters, once a year, complete live fire training. We don't get fires like we used to, thankfully. Little history lesson, this stands for 5 years, for every year in the service. Just over 25 years, I was 17 when I joined. And my first structure fire, the first year before I went to fire school, I got a kick in the ass from the chief. He said, "What are you standing out here for? Fire's in there." We've come a long way since those days. We wouldn't do that today, but I learned a lot of lessons really quick. My first year, we had 7 structure fires. We don't get those kind of numbers today, luckily. It wasn't in this district, it was in the neighboring district. So we need to keep that skill set right at the cusp of efficiency. So we do live fire training, and that's part of the hose advancing and hose deployment as well. After the floods, we identified with a little bit of education from the provincial report about climate change, that we're predicting more flash floods in the future, high water marks. We identified a need to have swiftwater rescue locally. Prior to that, events in the valley, which we did respond to the first night with our inshore boat and aided with some evacuations in places that were underwater. We also were involved with the searches in the days after. So out of those lessons, we learned that we were not prepared for those events. We feel that we're getting there now. It's a new program in this municipality. The group of firefighters weren't necessarily chiefs or captains or any rank at all. They got together amongst all the departments, all 7 in the municipality, and said, you know, we got to do something here. And that's really how it got started, by the grassroots. Then we moved into all training together, all buying the exact same equipment, and we're just in the process now of continuing the training and putting the logistics together of who will go to what, and when will go, and what to expect when that team comes in. So it's been a lot of work for the folks that were involved. I was involved from here. We had a lot of good folks heading up that project across the municipality, so it's good to see it coming to light now. That's really all I intended to say this evening. I did want to thank Maxine there in the back. Everybody wants to, actually loves when I do this. Thank you, Maxine. Maxine helps Greg and I keep the finances where the finances are supposed to be, the bills on time, and ensure that they're correctly billed. Not that anybody intentionally incorrectly bills us, but it does happen. And Greg, myself, and Maxine, we catch most of it. And then I want to thank Heather, because when we miss, she catches, which there's a lot of work goes in the background that people don't see to make that building just over the road operate. A lot of late night phone calls, a lot of weekend emails. Heather, we really thank you for the work you do to support us. Lastly, to our committee, unsung heroes. Oh, can I say that? Their job isn't always to say yes to us, their job is to manage this service that's best for the people that are receiving the service in the community. And they listen to us, they listen to our concerns, they take it to heart, and they do their very best to provide efficient emergency and fire services to this community. So, just want to say thank you. You're all kinds of involved across the province with different fire departments, and I feel very treasured to have you folks working with us alongside of us. With confidence. So, and with that, I thank all of you. Sorry, I was supposed to introduce Wilson. Wilson will now do his part, and I'll sit down again.
Thank you, Chief. Says, we're the unsung heroes on this committee, and what popped in my mind is that he could sing to us anytime he wanted. So,
Oh, Wilson.
I'm Wilson Fitt. I come out of the real estate development construction management world. I know almost nothing about fighting fires and hope to keep it that way. I've been tested for 20 years. I've done 2 projects here, both on a volunteer basis. One is the health center up here, which has been running for 8 to 10 years. With 17, and the theater, of course. And the closest I've come to a theater is when we were just about finished, and then we decided to set it on fire and start all over again. And thanks to the various fire departments, they prevented us from burning the whole damn village down. I think it was a close call at some points. So we'll try not. So I was asked in December to join this committee to help the planning of the fire hall exercise. I emphasize not to be the project manager, but to work as a member of the committee to get a team together that can actually make the project happen and to help with running numbers and logistics and finding people doing procurement, people who will do final design and will manage the project, actually build it. So that's all my play. Not new to it. Speak up, I'm being told by my wife. Oliver. So it's been fun so far. But I don't know much about fire departments. I was talking to Chief Stevens the other day on the phone, and he said he doesn't know anything about buildings. So between the 2 of us, we can meet in the middle and feel like that. This project is in the early stages now. What has been completed, the first stage of any project is a conceptual design, and that's these boards you see here, and then behind. If you haven't seen them already, go and have spend some time staring at them. But it's only a preliminary design. It's really still at the hand waving stage. That's all this is. And it's a preliminary design. Nobody's committed to anything specific. The idea is to present a concept plan that people can talk about sensibly. That's where we're at right now. Decide whether they like it or don't like it. Decide what should be changed, what works, what doesn't work. So it's very much in the preliminary stage. The next stage, and what needs to be moved into, is detailed design, or what the architects would call design development, which takes concept and makes it, brings it 8 or 10 more steps towards real, both in terms of size and what's inside the building, what it's built out of, and what's the cost. That's the next step. And then when the owners, maybe the municipalities in this case, sign off on that, then it goes into detailed design and working drawings ready to be tendered. That's the cycle, the very beginning of this cycle. It's very much an iterative process, back and forth, between the requirements, fire department's requirements, the cost of the building, which everybody gets excited about for good and valid reasons, and the ability and willingness of the municipalities, taxpayers, and municipalities to pay. So those 3 things have to come into alignment before anybody's going to pull the trigger. So there's the requirements, needs versus wants, and cost of the thing, and the ability to pay. Those three things have to come into alignment, and we've got probably about a year to make that happen. So now, come back to that, there's gonna have to be some money spent to make that happen. The company that did this work is called Acre, well, I think it's Acre Consultants, or Acre Design Company, and they're a very good firm. They've got lots of experience in all kinds of buildings, and they have a significant amount of fire hall experience. Obviously, I wasn't engaged at this stage in the process, but, and they may well end up being the firm that gets selected to do the final design, or they might not. That's a process that hasn't even started yet. So the requirements, I said three things: requirements, cost, and ability to pay. So I'll sort of run through those. The requirements. And the first question, and I got this fairly bluntly from people, since they know I've been on this committee, and I noticed that those people aren't at this meeting, so maybe I'm satisfied. But the first question, and you guys have probably hashed through all this a dozen times, but it's worth touching on, is there a new fire hall required at all? Wrong with it, have to be fixed up, and it is. So the existing building is about 60 years old, and I was told that it burned down once already.
It's the rebuild from when it broke.
Yeah, so that's a little bit embarrassing, but anyway. 60 years is about as much as you get out of any building at that age. By the time it's at that age, it needs major work to do. There has been a building condition survey done. It's available on the website. You can go and read it, and it's goes into all kinds of detail. It's done by Acre. And basically what it tells us is it's a mixed bag of construction techniques. It's been built and added to, and, burned down and added to again. So it's a real mishmash from a structural construction point of view. The electrical system is old. Main switchgear dates back to the 80s. The stock manufactured in the early 80s for that main switchgear there, so it's more than 40 years old, probably approaching 50 years old. And it's inadequate, certainly inadequate if you were to expand the building or add to it. You have to really do a major rebuild. The mechanical systems, plumbing, heating, and so on appear from the report to be in a little bit better shape. But again, if you start expanding the building or adding to it, and do the full refit of all of those mechanicals. The roof leaks, there's functional deficiencies, you barely get the trucks in there, not enough room beside the truck to shut it all the year on. So there's all kinds of issues there. I have difficulty imagining if that building was to be expanded and the renovations of it done, how you would do that and do it in situ and keep fire having operated. It's too intrusive. Logistically, you could do that work. And one of the real challenges, and I have the scars on my back to from experience with this, is when you go into an old building and you start doing major renovations, the friendly neighborhood building inspector is going to say, wait a minute, you have to bring it up to code. And that building does not come anywhere close to current building. Start trying to bring it up to code, you better off start all over. So the question was, is a new fire hall required? And all the answers are yes. You fix that one up, you fix anything, I guess it's going to cost you almost as much as it is to build a new one, and you're going to end up with building. So the next question is, we're talking about the requirements here, is how big does a fire hall need to be? And this is another slightly contentious, there are lots of discussions. This design is about 25,000 square feet. And the basic layout is simple. You can see it. See over here, there's a one-story section that's basically a big garage with overhead doors, high bay space inside. This one has a drive-through, so you go around with the truck and go straight through rather than having to back in. So the right-hand side of the building is a fairly simple big garage, and the left-hand side of the building is a two-story amenity support space. Nothing terrific and complex. There is always, and this is where the rubber is going to hit the road in the next few months here, after the initial conceptual design is done, and everybody has been asked, what it is, what do you want, what do you think you need, and the architects put it on paper, then the rubber starts to hit the road and prices come into play, and I'll come back to that, and the process of compression or reevaluation, which is probably in this case going to lead to some compression of that building. So there's always some wringing out of the slack in the program. At this stage of the game, that's what we do. That's what people like me do. So you use the pejorative phrase. That's what project managers do, is they go around and say, you have any faint idea how much it's going to cost you? Surely we can get all of the same functional services out of it. Less space, and less space means less initial money to build, and less money to operate over the long haul. So making your building smaller is a double win, as long as it still does the job for you. There is always pressure to go up, to make it bigger. And the pressure in this case will make it more expensive. So there's, has been discussion about should the village offices be there. My when I'm working with right now, no, I don't think it makes financial sense or logistic sense. But that would add space. There has been discussion about whether there should be some enhancements for energy efficiency or renewable energy, so geothermal, solar, any number of other things that are not being now. There's all kinds of reasons to go there, but they cost more money at the front end. Theoretically, there's a payback. Well, I shouldn't say theoretically. There is a payback. How much it is and how it plays into the financial model. Information model. Figure that out. There's other things that are not costed now in the budget that have been put on the table, cisterns for water storage. And the current pricing structure does not include a sprinkler system. That's another whatever in my head here right now. So it's not a sprinkler building because there's no water service. We certainly ran into this head on down at the theater. If you're going to have, if you're on municipal water, another hot button topic we don't want to. If you're on municipal water, then it's relatively easy and inexpensive to sprinkle the building. If not, then you have to have a buddy big system, same system that you can't supply water. You have a diesel fire emergency pump, sprinkler system, and you're talking significant amount of money. It's not in the budget now. And the last thing that should be talking in terms of evaluating the route to which this design meets all of those conflicting requirements is you need to keep in mind that that's going to be a 60-year building. And it's very difficult to predict future requirements, but you don't want to cut it so deeply that in 10 years' time you say, oh my God, why did we not do X? And that requires a bit of first of all exercise. So it is a long-term building. Materials should be the best and most durable. The building systems should be the best. The building controls, all of that sort of stuff should be as good as they can be made. So blowing your head off with costs. So that's where we are. We're at an early stage still, but now there's something to talk about in a concrete way, something to shoot at, something to evaluate, add to, subtract from. So cost analysis is extremely challenging. This is a very, very, very uncertain environment. And it's getting worse at a very rapid pace, as everybody knows. We used to be able to build a nice building. Well, we built I was project manager for the waterfront campus for the Nova Scotia Community College. We're going back 20 years ago now. We built that building, which is a very high quality building, for $150 a square foot, all in. $150 doesn't get you anywhere now. No, you can't even really get started for that kind of money. And it has gone up dramatically, costs have gone up dramatically in the last few years, and there's nothing that I can see that indicates that's going to stop. We're really in an upward spiral. All of the political issues that are going on with our American cousins are just going to make that worse. There is, in the first stage, the way you get a handle on this is you hire a cost consultant. In the first stage, the cost consultant is a company by the name of Handstone. They're very well, they're all over the country. And they go through even a preliminary set of drawings like this in great detail and apply benchmarks. There's some design information that they apply benchmark costs. All of the various systems. It's what's called a Class B estimate, which means that it's not terribly reliable, frankly. And in their report, they say specifically, their number is plus or minus 20 to 30%. The final cost. And I would ignore the minus part of that, plus or minus, although it's in the report. But that's what a Class B estimate is, and that's standard industry practice for the conceptual design stage. So they have applied a price tag, or they said your estimate is $12.5 million, basically, for hard construction costs. And there's no basis which to dispute that. It seems, not unlikely to be on a per square foot basis. And then we need to. Job I've done add in design fees, add in project management costs and permitting costs and interest during construction and insurance and all of these other soft costs, and add in contingencies because there's so much uncertainty. And when I first rolled these numbers out, I think that's ludicrous. Handstone says their estimate is plus or minus, what did I say, 20 to 30%. So in contingencies, just for the sake of argument, I added in 20% market shifts and 10% for price escalations, because we never decide to pull the trigger to the time you get the bid. There's also escalation there. And once you do get your bids in and you hire a general contractor, there's always change orders. So this have other changes. That's 40% on top of the basic. And there's also an HST cost. This is not including land. The land is the bought, so we're not putting land in the right. And when you do all that, you end up somewhere north of $20 million. So that does not include land. It doesn't tell us anything about what's going to happen to the old building, demolition costs, or the recovery value of the existing site. But that's not in that number. It's off of the so the cost savings, obviously, build a smaller building without compromising function. You guys are nodding your head. Are you saying yes? You're saying yeah, go for it. You're just nodding your head, just hearing what I'm saying. Explore more economical building systems, I guess. That's a steel frame and concrete building with metal cladding. Can you build a building with equal square feet with a more economical system? Is it going to be as durable? Well, I don't know. That's what needs to be hashed through. These are the trade-offs that need to be made in the next little while. So the third button I pushed after the requirements and the cost, the stability and willingness to pay. And this is a very much an unknown yet. Not enough information to throw any numbers around by any stretch right now. But sources of funds, reserves, hip pocket, which is empty. Grants, and Heather has done a whole lot of work identifying grants that might be applicable, and Heather, correct me if I'm wrong, but the answer is there aren't.
Not much.
There are grants available for accessibility, grants available for energy initiatives. Are happening with they will be at. There's big government changes in Canada, it's another matter. But the short answer to getting government grants is it's not the ability. Unless the environment changes. There's fundraising, and our fearless leader, Colin McDonald, has taken on that, and I don't know what number he's got in mind. He has, he's in charge. That's I can say there, okay? So fundraising will be an element, and then the balance of it, which is likely to be the bulk of it, is going to be borrowed through a municipal debenture. Every period of time, 20 years, paid back, and the cost of the borrowing million dollars in tax. That's what that number is, because talk about it. Those are the four sources of money. Somebody has a better or yet another fifth idea, please. So the schedule, where do we go from here? We need to retain a design team and a project manager. And I've been working with Heather and the procurement people at the municipality to develop RFPs. I will work with public bids. As I said, the design team may end up being Baker. They're going to do a leg up on this, or somebody else, but it'd be a public tender call, and the idea is to get it out and award it by the end of April. And that would allow detailed design to get underway, which should be done by this time next year. So January, February of 2026. We should have a fully costed detailed design ready for the tender, and that will allow construction tenders in February, March, April of next year. And I sort of boldly said the thing could be built in a year. I've had several people dreaming, maybe it's a year, maybe say in the early first half of 2027. Then the building would be nearing completion with the move in during that summer period. Following plan. So that's kind of the time frame that's being talked about. There's a lot of issues that we sort of through. All of that to say.
Thank you, Wilson. At this point, first go into adjust the budget.
Good evening, everybody. Can you hear me? Yes. Do I need this?
Yes.
Okay. So first of all, you've heard some presentations from our chief, and he talked about asking the heroes, and I think he's got that reversed. When you think of the fire departments out there, not just in Chester, but generally, these are volunteers. And I think that sometimes that gets lost on a lot of people. And when you heard the number of calls and the work that they do, and the time and the commitment that they make to our community, they are the heroes. And then you heard from Wilson, the challenges that we're going to face in building a new fire station here in Chester. The need is real, it's very great. And there'll be a process that we will go through to get us to something that works for the fire department and that we can afford. So one of the key objectives of this committee is to support our most valuable asset. And our most valuable asset is the firemen and women of this community that arrive at the scene and help keep us safe. They give freely of their time and talents. And as I said, these people are volunteers. They're not a paid service. But when they arrive at an emergency scene, we expect the same professional service of this fire department that you would get with a paid service. So we need to support them with the training, the equipment, and a fire station to meet their needs. So Heather and I and the chief and deputy chief spent a lot of time on the budget. It's a process. So Heather will take you through the hard numbers of the budget here tonight, but we go through it line by line. First, the fireman, the chief, and the deputy go through it, and they look at all of the individual items that they spend money on, that they need to operate the service. And then we go through it with them line by line so that we can arrive at what the number might be for this year. And so some of the considerations that we have is that there is a 20-year plan in terms of trucks and equipment. And also they are developing a new 5-year capital plan for trucks and equipment. And as an example, number 541, the pumper tanker truck needs to be replaced. It should have been replaced earlier, but it's been pushed back to 2027. There's a 2-year lead time to get a new truck, and as the firemen all around the table, around the room here know that. And so in order for us to meet that commitment of having that truck in place in 2027, that truck will, the order for it will need to be placed no later than this summer, and the cost could be up to $2 million. And as Norm talked about in the very start here, there are many kinds of new fires today. Most of them are chemical fires. And if you think about, you guys drive in Chester and the community, you see the electric cars out there. The firemen all know that when they arrive on a scene with an electric car that's in a mishap or a fire, it's a different ball of wax than what they would have with just ice-powered or gasoline-powered cars in the past. And of course, there are other challenges with the building materials and the ever-changing nature of fires when they respond to them. Also, the new threats that the fire department looks after, swift water rescue, and of course, as we talked earlier, the wildfires. We saw what happened in Shelburne and Hammonds Plains 2 years ago, and more recently, what's happened in California. And as Wilson just explained, phase 2 of the fire station. There's multiple phases of this. We're now approaching phase 2, which is the final design, engineering, and tender documents. It all takes place in this fiscal year. Those public requests for proposals are going out this month. And so we don't have a cost, as Wilson, there's many variables. We don't know what the cost will be at this point, but in the next step, it could possibly cost us $1 million in the next financial year. Once we have a cost and we know what the financing arrangements will be, then we'll come back for another public meeting and talk to the residents and the ratepayers about what it looks like. In conclusion of the proposed fire rate, what I would say to you, the overarching need is that we need more funding for both capital and reserves. So one of the key parts in preparing the budget is the proposed fire tax rate. So last year at our annual meeting a year ago, we talked about the need to increase the rate and the need for more financial resources to support capital projects and reserves. Our fire tax rate of 0.74 was the lowest in the municipality for many years. And to help support the needs of the fire department, the plan is to increase the rate gradually. We could have come in and said in our proposal, well, let's take it up to what the average is of what the other districts in the municipality. And the agreement was wholeheartedly, let's do this gradually, let's see what the needs are and what we can afford in there. So the municipality for years, to help support the needs of the fire department, the plan is to increase the rate gradually over the coming years and have it align with the other fire services in the municipality. For the coming financial year, fiscal year, the rate is proposed to go up by 2 cents to 11.4 cents. And if you look at that, the chart will show you the rates. No, go one back one, please. Yeah. So if you look at this and you look at these rates are from the 24-25 year, and you can see that many of the districts have a much higher rate than what we do. In fact, Martins River, New Ross, Western Shore are in the 16 to 17 cent range. We are 9.4 cents. And even with our new proposed rate of 11.4 cents, we'll still be among the lowest. We'll basically be close to Chester Basin and Hubbards, and that's assuming that they don't have any increases in their rates in the next budget year. So the increased rate that we're proposing will generate $238,000 of additional revenue, or 18.8%. 200,000 of that money, the lion's share of it, for 84% of these monies, will go to reserves and capital. So it's not going into the operations. 38,000, 16%, will go to an increase in operations. And the majority of that, the lion's share, is for one item, and that's to replace on-site radios. So when the firemen are in a fire scene or emergency scene today, their radios are on the outside of their equipment, which is really doesn't offer them that great of protection because it from heat and other things. These new radios will go inside of their fire equipment, and the cost is north of 25,000. So of that 38,000 that we're putting into the operations of the fire department, 25,000 at least is for these new radios, which will increase their safety. So the proposed fire tax rate, as you can see there, of 11.4 cents, it matches up against what the rest of the municipality is paying on average of 13.3 cents. So we're still 2 cents below the average of the rest of the municipality. So what I'd like at this time is turn the floor over to Heather, and she will take us through the numbers of the budget.
Thank you, Kirk. So yes, as Kirk mentioned, we've been through a few rounds of this, myself and Cody and Greg and Kirk, and then the full committee, and then the full committee, and so on. So we go through this in quite a bit of detail. And alas, there is still some unknowns in this budget, so there will be some updates to it before it goes to council and the commission for final approval. And there will also likely be an update to it partway through the fiscal year. But we'll.
Heather, can you make that any bigger?
Yeah, I don't
That's
think
all
I
right.
can.
I didn't know.
So note that this is working budget version 5. In drafting the budget, we compared budgets and actuals from the past 3 years to consider patterns. In this document, the 2 purple-headed columns are the current fiscal year, 24-25, included to show the year-to-date budget variance as of Q3, or December 31st, 2024. This is 75% of the year, but please note that some larger expenses are held until Q4 to safeguard cash flow. So if a number looks low, that's probably why. The pale orange column on the right is the 2025-26 budget draft. Any blank lines you see there just represent a line item for a previous budget that doesn't carry over. So for revenue, it's important to note that the revenue figures we have at the moment are placeholders based on last year's assessment plus 1.5%, which is the increase in the capped rate. The municipality will be providing us with a more accurate revenue projection, but we have not yet received that. So this is still a placeholder. It has also been proposed that the island fireboat rate be discontinued as the fireboat is no longer in service. And that again is a question that goes before council soon. You will see in expenses though that the inshore boat is in service and able to support boat and water rescues. There is a TBD here on surplus equipment sale. Revenue for the old fireboat, which will be publicly posted for sale in the spring, so that has been declared surplus. And no idea what that sell price will eventually be, but the amount must be deposited to the apparatus reserve and cannot go into general funds. And then there's a very important TBD here, which is the bit we'll probably have to come back later in the fiscal. So this is on the line Capital Fire Station Phase 2 funding. The note on that reads, funding for capital new fire station project Phase 2 is unknown at this time. Line item to be amended later in fiscal year and brought back for approval. When/if borrowing is required, a public meeting will be held for community approval. Basically, once we know the cost, we'll have to put funding in place to match. So, and when we come to you looking for funding, the figure has to be really what's required. And then also on this page is just an expenses summary of operating capital and reserves, just as a snapshot to easily compare the total revenue versus total expenses. This will all be posted on the website tomorrow, so you'll be able to get a better look at it. Yeah. So operational expenses. In the interest of time, I'm only going to comment where there's a notable change over previous years. First, the operations budget. These are the day-to-day costs of running a fire department. So this section is administration. This is up about 4.8% to get a little bit more realistic with some of these numbers based on the actual spend over the past number of years. The firefighting force section, that's roughly the same as this year, so a little bit lower. Training and education is here, and there's a slight addition to add in some travel expenses to a provincial conference that hasn't been attended for a few years. Firefighting equipment, some of the hoses need replacement, so that is in the budget for next year. And then personal protective equipment. This is the same as last year because these are items with a replacement cycle. So many one year, so many the next. They never get all of them at once. This past year, 2 grants were received from the province to offset some PPE and capital wildfire equipment costs. These are not annual, however, so we have to plan accordingly. And those offsets are not shown in the Q3 numbers of this year yet because we hadn't yet received them when at the end of that quarter. Communication. For improvement in field communication, 28 new radios will be purchased that can be worn in a holster under the firefighter's jacket, as Kirk mentioned. A melted radio does not help anyone in an emergency situation. So we're going to get the first round of those and they'll be field tested and we'll see how we go. Maintenance is roughly the same as last year. It's a tiny bit lower. Fire station building, roughly the same as last year, tiny bit lower. Fireboat, as the main unit 571 rescue boat is no longer in operation, the only cost shown is a moderate maintenance allotment for the number 572 inshore boat. So that's this here. So that's a big difference. So subtotal rather operating. In total, there's a 7.65 increase in operating costs projected. So pretty manageable. Capital expenses. Note that this will show the expenditure end of the TBD, so capital project consultants right here, new station TBD. So this note, it reads, capital new fire station project phase 2 costs are unconfirmed at this time. Line item to be amended later in fiscal year and brought back for approval. Phase 2 is the final design and engineering and tender documents for the build to bring the project to the shovel-ready stage. Tentative estimate for 25-26 is approximately $1 million, subject to change again until we get some costs in. We don't know for sure. So you will hear from us again on this. Other fees for the new station include communications, website and social media management and monitoring to keep the public as informed as possible, surveying, etc. This line is expected to be under this year since some planned surveying and legal fees to do with the land at 4070 Highway 3 will roll over into 25-26. We've added in some funding for repairs to the existing building, which we still have to keep standing in the meantime. For example, there's a leak in the roof that must be fixed. So that is something we do have to address sooner than later. The largest item here is a projected 10% down payment for the replacement of the unit 541, the truck for delivery in 2027, which we have currently placed in coming out of active revenue, not reserves. And then there should be just sufficient funds in the apparatus reserve by 2027 to pay the balance of the truck when we get there. So that one's a little tight, but we think we'll manage. Reserves, we're planning on a total 13.5 increase to apparatus and building reserve deposits next fiscal, which again are 55% of the annual increase in revenue. You can see why we're concerned about these levels. The operating reserve is a little different as it is funded with any surplus funds from the current year, and we won't know what or if there are any until the end of year audit. Any surplus funds must go to the operating reserve and may not remain in active funds. So total expenses, at the end of the day, the total expenses are 18.6% more in this draft compared to a revenue increase of 18.8%. But as I said, there's a wee bit more work to do on this once we have the real revenue projection that may see some of these numbers shift a little. On the whole, though, this is our best estimate right now today. And this is just kind of a repeat of the first slide to show total revenue, total expenses as of this draft. And I will pass it back over to Kurt for some final comments.
So at the end of the day, for many years, our fire tax rate was the lowest in the municipality. And this was great fiscally for the ratepayers. The low tax rate, however, did not afford the investment needed to keep pace with the growing demands placed on our fire and emergency services today. And the slide there, you'll see three things that I think are key in this presentation tonight. One is obviously the need for a new fire station, which you see on your left, the need for new trucks that you see on your right, and to tie it all together, there's the need for the safety of the firemen who are in the center. So as we outlined, there is a great need for a new fire station and equipment to support and protect our most valuable assets, the firefighters. The added revenue from the increased tax rate, 84% goes to support capital and reserves. We appreciate your support on these initiatives and the support you show for the men and women of our fire service. Thank you very much.
Heather, for your work on that. I know that that's incredible work. Appreciate all you put into it. At this point, I'll open it to the floor for questions. So what we can do to oh, it's going to be Martin, but okay. No.
Question. Did the topic that's going with a design build contractor come into play that has experience in this, like start to finish? And, you know, I know back when I had the committee to build a new building about 15 years ago, I was working in construction at the time, and I brought Lindsay's into a meeting. And they built quite a few fire stations around the province at the time, and they gave you a design, or you gave them a requirement, they designed it, they built it, and they guaranteed it for a period of years. Is that from brought into the picture? Not only Lindsay's, I mean, that could have been Stevens's, or it could have been,
What you're talking about is a design build process. So what this is envisioned as now is we have a design team that completes a design and it goes out for competitive bidding. Design build process has been used, there's one of the fire halls that they're doing that with right now. I can't remember, it's Summerside or up in, doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. It's quite a different procurement process. I have never been a real big fan of that because what you do is you develop a list of requirements and then you hand it over to a contractor who hires the architect. And the contractor and the architect seem to me to be an inherent conflict of interest, because once you hand it to the contractor and you fix a price, they'll say, we'll build you a building that meets these requirements for X zillion dollars. It's in their interest to go as cheap as they can to meet
Oh,
that price
aware
and
of that.
maximize their profit.
I see a couple of layers of design and build, and I
Yeah.
just wondered if there was
So,
a more efficient.
My recommendation to the committee has been to complete a design, have Hanscom or a cost consultant do, another round or 2 rounds of cost estimates, so you've got a pretty good idea what it's going to cost, and you can do that jockeying between requirements and affordability before it goes out on the street. And at the same time, hire a very qualified project manager who will beat up on the architect and beat up on the owners and make that process work. And then go and get at least 3 competitive bids from the market. That's my recommendation, rather than doing it as a design build where you just have a, half developed set of requirements and you throw it out to the contractor and say, build me this. And you get what you get.
Oh, yeah.
Questions? Okay. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Wondering if we know if there's any other communities, not necessarily at this site, who have volunteered firefighting communities. Any fire halls in the
Yeah.
last 5 years?
Yes, there's been a great number that have been built over the last 5 years. This particular design is a bit of a reflection of one that was that Acre just did in New Brunswick. So that's where that's coming from. But we also have input from the Mahone Bay Fire Hall. Cody, help me out.
Yeah. Mahone Bay, Blocko,
Hansport.
Italy Cross,
Italy Cross.
Berwick.
No, that's not the one. Is it Avonport? One that just finished Avonport?
Hansport.
Hansport is the latest one. So yes, we've been collecting details and information from all of them.
Middleton's in process. Canning was about 5 years ago. Berwick was actually 11 years ago, which really makes me.
So you're able to kind of compare the size of the building, say, and make the cost.
To some degree, yes. Yeah. There, just to finish on that, there was an article in the paper not that long ago about Summerside, and there was a nice number there of $11 million to build a 4-bay unit, which would be a little bit smaller than this one, but it's a little bit deeper, so it would hold 8 trucks in it. I followed up with their town communications director, or their city's communications director, and they were very quick to point out that's a very preliminary number, just like the one we talked about today. And to be quite honest, I'm not sure where in the phase of procurement they are in terms of even determining their number.
Yeah.
So if somebody sees that and says,
You don't
why
know
can't
what's
we
in
do it
there.
for half of that? Yeah,
Can I chime in?
certainly.
My advice is if you read a construction cost number in the paper, don't believe it, because you have no idea what's in it. So you don't know if it includes land, if it includes design, if it includes contingencies, or it's just a number that came out of a cost consultant that doesn't excludes all that. You just don't know what's being quoted. So it's impossible without digging into the background to compare something that you read in the newspaper with something that you've got here. And we're doing our best to build a real number, not a self-delusion sort of number, which is tempting at this stage of the game. The other thing is that I've recommended to the chief and to the committee that some touring be done around recent fire halls, in the last 6 or 8 years that have been built, to see what they did and to see what worked, and even more important, to see what didn't work. What would they do differently? And as an industry, I'm not an architect or an engineer, but I've been in this industry for a long time. One of the things that we are really not very good at is going to buildings that have already been built and trying to do a post-occupancy evaluation to see what works. We tend to hire an architect and do everything from scratch. And sometimes there's something to be learned just down the street. So I think we should go and learn that something.
Gary, you had a question?
Same question. If there are any, bring the fire chiefs with them and see what their requirements are, if they're at it. That would be the most economical way that I think, because in the city of Elmira, securing all kinds of prices, paying $1 million that we just talked about, to have it done. I'm sure we can do that a whole lot cheaper. And money is the issue here. Remember, it's nothing else.
Yeah, I'm a taxpayer too. I don't want to spend any more than we have to. Jim, you had a question? Yes.
Right now, we have a certain number of vehicles. Are we looking at a ladder truck in the future? Not a ladder, but
An aerial device.
aerial truck.
So we are in discussions around what that would look like to our service.
There'll be space here for this.
The hall, in intent, is designed to add an aerial apparatus at some point as the data comes in that it's required. And by data, I mean, when we look at our threats, our true threats, such as the Playhouse, not to overplay the Playhouse. But that threat was real, and I don't think there's many in this room who didn't see that. And we were 47 minutes from time of call when we asked for it, which was automatically dispatched until it was ingested. So if you're bored, go on YouTube and look at what 47 minutes does to a fully involved fire.
Searching, see the back, what those weapons are in that area. Have they got on fire?
Yeah, it was detrimental that day.
So
Go ahead, Sharon.
whenever the fire boat is done, do you plan to replace that?
Do you want me to?
Heather can maybe suggest, talk to that to some degree.
Only because Cody and I spent a long time on a report for council about that. So we actually, there's a quite detailed report listing some options of replacing exactly what we have, which was the Boston Whaler, getting something sort of similar, but not quite the same. And just to be clear too, as Cody likes to remind us, that the fireboat was never about structure fires on islands. They didn't have that capability. And to get something that does, you'd need that crazy multi-million-dollar boat from HRM, which that was what, about $1 million, 1.4 a few years ago. And apparently there's still some, it's not perfect. It needs a bit of retrofitting. Anyhow, so And the other option was to discontinue the service because we obviously can't provide it right now. So we did break down a little bit of what we thought some of those costs might look like. It's in that report, which I don't have in front of me, unfortunately. But honestly, given the other supports in fire departments in the area, the Coast Guard and so on and so forth, it looked a bit more like we could probably live without it. We only had it in the first place because it was a donation. Sorry, and I had one other thought and now it's left my brain.
But my concern
Yeah, we do still have the small boat,
Yeah.
yes.
is the loss of revenue that we're getting from that. I think that brings in $100,000.
It doesn't actually. It only took in about 10 to 15,000 a year, which was really barely enough to maintain it, let alone do anything capital.
You'll have better answers when Heather comes to council, Sharon, and that presentation is made. And then you folks can make some decisions.
We still have a small inshore boat. Please, everybody, say, don't go thinking we don't have a boat. We do have a small one, it's trailered, but it's just not the large whaler that we used to have.
Yeah, that report actually shows every call that's been done over the past 10 years. So you get an idea of what its use has been.
Question about the new comfort truck, how much? I mean, is it coming from the States?
So- If you want to go in this discussion, my life, my everyday life is fire trucks. It's what I eat, breathe, and sleep as a career. Price of fire trucks is volatile at best, long before the self-supportive situation. One of the largest manufacturers in North America in the first year of COVID had a 16% increase in pricing over 1 year, six price increases. If you look in history to one of the larger municipalities in the city or in this province, in 2012, an engine was $650,000, the same engine this year is $1 million. So there's been a large increase. The number that we've suggested is hopefully large enough to encompass whatever may happen south of the border. And hopefully we're well under that. But we looked at trucks that are currently being built and paid for today, this fiscal year, and that is the cost number. And it's impossible to give an exact number until we sign on the paper, but we're hoping to come in under. But the reality is that truck is a portable hydrant system, and this fire district cannot live without it. If you're bored, go on YouTube. Somebody took a beautiful aerial view of 1,600 feet of 5-inch high volume supply line laid from the yacht club to the theater. That's what we require, is that water. We don't have water, everything else is irrelevant. So that truck, I heard Wilson talk about a water system as a hot button. That is our portable hydrant system. We can reach everywhere in the village with that truck, and that is the intent of it. There's a 90 feet of suction, which is what goes out into the salt water, and that guy sitting right there had 90 feet on one night as he kept getting wet and added another 10 feet. So we've been through enough in Chester to know what that truck needs to do. And it comes at a price. It's all, I don't know what that's gonna be. The price of raw aluminum is what drives the cost of fire trucks. So if there's a 25% tariff on raw aluminum going into the US, that'll be a direct result to the price of the truck.
The Canadian manufacturers, are they all in the States?
So that's a two big question. There is no Canadian truck chassis manufacturer. Every chassis that I know of, both fire service and the US. There are Canadian builders that will take that chassis, bring it north, and then build the rest. So our plan is to yes, then we go to a broad RFP to try and capture all of We are, as Canadians, very in the fire service, almost held captive to the US Army. There's no denying. So, I'm not really sure. Hopefully, we put enough number there to get where we can get, but if it gets too crazy, I'm not, so, hopefully it doesn't. So I get my brain going now. I hope I answered your question, maybe.
Anybody else for questions? Call this meeting to the.
I'll just make that question. Seems inevitable that some sort of significant rate increase is gonna be required for the new building. And while I appreciate that we're trying to ease it up slowly, we've had a very low rate for a long time, and it remains one of the lowest. I mean, have you thought about trying to bring it up a bit more, and try to build a bit more reserves sooner? I mean, you don't have a lot of time to try to build reserves, and trying to turn on the taps at the last minute to build them. It just seems like it, I just don't know. I get the politics of it, but
Yeah.
more than anybody. But really, I mean, you've got a big job ahead of you here, and, you know, a few more cents now might help out.
Two things, when we started the previous year and when we talked about that, that was a bit of a hot button. We thought it was like, we should be raising this rate higher. We got some community feedback through different channels, through different people. Who were very concerned about what that was gonna look like and how that was gonna impact them. So we had several discussions on that to say, okay, I think this is gonna be too much for communities to deal with. We had that hyperinflationary period at the same time we were trying to bring this on. And so it's just like, we need to respect this a little bit. So that's why we brought on this gradual rate. I'm not sure how much of a massive jump it's gonna take to pay for this. I am optimistic that once we get to figuring out a donor phase and a donor plan and strategy for donations towards it, that's gonna augment quite a little bit of the costing. That's my hope. Colin, unfortunately, isn't here to speak to that, so put it on him to sort of say that, but I can appreciate that, but we don't have the numbers yet to exactly say, you know, this is where it needs to be, and if we stick our neck out and say, okay, it's gonna be this, and it isn't that, then we've lost a lot of credibility, and we've spent a lot of time talking about the costing and how to get there, so I think we're staying the course of what we're gonna do. It's gonna be, I appreciate.
Well, that's clearly your recommendation at this thing. You know, I sincerely feel that it's already a low rate.
Yeah.
And nobody wants a tax increase. Nobody's saying me. But, you know, I think it's very justifiable considering the job that's ahead here. And, you know, you're not going to get positive commentary. If you're waiting for that to come from the public, they're not going to come.
Agreed, and appreciate that feedback.
Just one quick statement. I think as the village grows, so is the demand on the fire department. And I think they should demand, just to follow up on what you're saying. I agree that we're the lowest in the neighborhood.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, we've had numerous discussions about this, and I guess it's definitely warranted to say that, you know, we do have an amazing fire department staff that's unpaid, it's volunteer, they're top notch. They don't like hearing all of it, but they're there for the community, and yeah, for a while, maybe there should have been more planning put towards capital in the future, so this is where we are now, and this is where we need to move to. I certainly see that, I certainly see my emails when people start complaining about rate increases.
I just note that none of those people, as Wilson mentioned, are here, and it's always the same people who are here.
When we thank you all, please.
Yeah, no. So we're doing a lot of worrying about people who aren't out there giving their opinions.
That's right.
I think Andre's not wrong.
Certainly.
Yeah, one thing that I would say, and remember back to Wilson's presentation there, is that right today, we're very much in the preliminary stages. So we talked about, or he talked about what the cost was going to be, or what it could be, but he also talked about the compression. And when you go, you know, and you look at what's really needed and all the different parameters that can come into it. So we don't know what the price is going to be, and we don't want to drive the rate too high and find that maybe we don't really need to be there, because there is going to be a very aggressive fundraising campaign through Colin. I don't want to, you know, put words out there for him, but he certainly talked about that. So, you know, until we know what that design is going to be and what the cost is going to be and where the fundraising is, I think it's somewhat prudent to go the way we are going. We've had many discussions on this tax rate, and there were some on our committee said, let's put her up there. But there's a lot of residents in the community that perhaps are struggling with different aspects of their finances. So we want to be respectful of that. And so we need to find a way to work through this. But I think that until we know more about the cost of the fire station and what that fundraising will be, really it's going to impact what we do with the tax rate, or recommend, I should say, what we recommend with the tax rate.
In closing, I'd like to thank you all for coming this evening. It's great to hear that feedback, and greatly appreciate everybody here and our volunteer fire department. Thanks again, and stay tuned